John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry, Virginia took place on October 16, 1859. He led a group of 18 men into a small town with hopes of sparking a slave rebellion in the South. He would arm slaves and collect hostages, but none of the slaves came to rebel with him. He was captured by troops under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Robert E. Lee. Brown was later tried and sentenced to hang on December 2nd. This would lead to the North admiring his efforts and courage for the raid. Brown was turned into an instant martyr. On the other hand, Southerners were shocked and outraged. As the election of 1860 rolled around, Abraham Lincoln became an enemy in the South. Before Brown was executed, he handed his last statement to the guard. It read, "I, John Brown, am now certain that the crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away but with blood." The raid failed, but it brought sectional tensions and helped make the North and South coming together nearly impossible, and became an important cause of the Civil War. The Kansas-Nebraska Act. This was a bill that was passed in 1854 that allowed the settlers of the territory to decide whether slavery should be allowed through the state. This act was basically a repeal for the Missouri Compromise. The aftermath of this act led to a period of violence known as the Bleeding Kansas. Bleeding Kansas was a mini-civil war. After this, the South began to secede from the Union. This fighting and violence helped split the North and South and lead to what would be known as America's Civil War.
The Missouri Compromise. The Missouri Compromise was a legislation that made Missouri a slave state and Maine a free state. This helped to maintain equality and balance of free and slave states. The Missouri Compromise contributed to disputes between the North and South about slavery. Pro and anti-slavery factions were made in the Congress. When the Missouri Territory first applied for statehood in 1818, it was clear that many in the territory wanted to allow slavery in state. This created political oppositions, dividing the nation, and this led to the Confederate States of America 40 years down the road after the Missouri Compromise. The Missouri Compromise of 1820 made the latitude 3630 the northern limit for slavery to be legal in the territories of the West. The election of 1860. The Democrats met in Charleston, South Carolina in April of 1860 to select their candidate for the presidential election. The main issue of the election was slavery and state rights. Lincoln won and became the 16th President of the United States during a national crisis that would tear states and families apart. This would test Lincoln's leadership skills and integrity. The election of 1860 was an effect of the Civil War because Lincoln wasn't for slavery, and slavery in a large section of America was favored, so lots of people didn't want him to be president in fear that he would abolish slavery altogether. The South became outraged because they knew that Lincoln's plan was to abolish slavery. Congress would ban slavery in all territory that might become part of the United States as the result of the Mexican-American War. Lincoln wins with 0 votes from southern states. Because Lincoln was elected with no southern votes, the southern states ended up seceding from the Union.
Harriet Tubman on the Underground Railroad. Who is Harriet Tubman? Harriet Tubman is a slave who escaped and decided to go back to slaveholding many times to help other slaves escape. The Underground Railroad was a network of secret routes and safe houses established in the United States during early mid-1800s. It was used to help slaves escape into free states north and into Canada. Harriet Tubman had a main role in the Underground Railroad. She was called the conductor of the Underground Railroad and helped other slaves escape to freedom. Harriet Tubman would go back and put herself in great danger every time. There was a great bounty offered for Harriet Tubman because she herself was a fugitive slave. Any time if someone wanted to go back, Harriet Tubman would pull out a gun and say, "You'll be free or die a slave." She knew if anyone turned back, it would put her in great danger. How did Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad lead in the Civil War? This led in the Civil War, first of all, because Harriet Tubman herself was a wanted runaway slave for $50,000. Another huge reason this led in the Civil War is because owners were losing millions of dollars due to the Underground Railroad. Due to Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad, it provoked and angered the South, which was a direct contributor to the cause of the Civil War. Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. What is the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850? Fugitive Slave Act was a law passed by the United States Congress on September 18th saying that slaves must be returned to their owners even if they were in a free state. If people were even suspected to be a slave, then owners would take them even if they weren't. Many riots and mobs would take place due to this. Due to the law taking place, many slaves would move upward towards Canada to escape U.S. jurisdiction. How did the Fugitive Slave Act lead into the Civil War? Basically, the Fugitive Slave Act is seen as one of the major events that led up to the Civil War, which began in 1865. One reason why it led up to the Civil War is because it allowed the federal government to deputize citizens against their will with force. Basically, slaves' freedom was being taken away.
What was the cotton gin? The cotton gin was invented in 1794 by Eli Whitney. The cotton gin was used to separate fibers from cotton faster. It led to the war because if a machine was used to be able to separate fibers, then they could make other machines to get rid of the need of slaves entirely and still mass-produce products. And it fueled the North to get rid of slavery. What was Nat Turner's rebellion? Nat Turner was a slave preacher who led a 2-day rebellion in Virginia, which caused the death of 60 white men, women, and children. After a few months of being on the run, Turner was captured. He confessed to the rebellion and was tried, convicted, and hung. News of this rebellion spread to the rest of the South and is said to have expedited the coming of the Civil War. What was the difference between the North economy and the South economy? There are two major differences between the economies of the North and South during the Civil War. The North had a diversified economy based on the notion of free labor. The South economy was based on slave labor, primarily the production of cotton for export. Slaves were forced to work the plantations in the South. These economic differences is what led to the Civil War.
King Cotton was a phrase used by Southern politicians and authors prior to the American Civil War. The phrase was used to indicate the importance of cotton production and that the North needed the South's cotton. In a speech to the Senate in 1858, James Hammond declared, "You dare not make war upon cotton. No power on earth dares make war upon it. Cotton is king." Uncle Tom's Cabin was written by Harriet Beecher Stowe in 1853. This book is about the fugitive slave laws and intensified the feelings of the abolitionists in the North. This book sold over 300,000 copies in the first year and turned lots of Northerners against slavery. This led to the Civil War because it made the South look bad, and it was a direct attack on the Southern way of life.